Welcome to the In-Between, where shift happens. This podcast is for anybody who has ever found themselves in that space in between what was and what's going to be. That space where life happens. The moment between where we are and where we're going. That space that is often uncomfortable to sit in. The stuff of life, the ups, the downs, the moments of connection and insight, and the moments where we can't see two steps in front of us. We will ask all the questions, maybe find some answers, and generally work at being okay in the mystery of the in-between. And today we are talking about body liberation. And so we are here with my dear friend, Yvette Trujillo, and I am just super excited to be having this conversation with you. Yvette is one of the warmest hearts I have ever met and has so much wisdom to share. I think from generations beyond her own experience. It's pretty amazing. And so the way this is going to work is I have some questions that Yvette has never heard before, and I'm going to pop them on the spot, and we're just going to kind of go for it. We're going to have some conversation about body liberation and why it's important, and I don't know, we'll see where it goes. We'll see what happens. So right. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dan. It's good to see you. I love the introduction. I was like, oh, yeah, uncomfortable. Yeah.
Here for it. Here for it.
This is one of those conversations, this is a cool conversation. It's like, oh, this is an uncomfortable conversation. But those are good. Those are good, too. So.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing this whole thing, right? I mean, the podcast is the uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Really, I mean, we could have named it. We could have named it so many other things, but it's that all that stuff that I'll say nobody's really been talking about. Mm-hmm. None of us were really raised to talk about. In fact, we've all been raised to avoid the discomfort, avoid making somebody feel something, anything at all. Yeah. So cool. Today, body liberation. So, in your experience, what is body liberation? Why is it important? What does body liberation mean? And why is it important to you?
So it means, I guess, a few things to me. When I first started thinking of body liberation, and this kind of comes to a habit that I have of always taking responsibility for whatever is going wrong in a room. That's just kind of how I show up. My wife laughs. She's like, you always think, well, what did I do? And I always think, what did they do? Or what's wrong with them? It's an interesting way of looking at things. So for me, when I first think of body liberation, I think of how my desire to liberate my body from the oppression that I have put it under. And that comes from a lot, right? It comes from the world. It comes from the way that I was raised. It comes from generations before me. But here I am in this moment, and the responsibility for liberating my body is mine. Mm. And, and when I say liberating my body, it's that how I oppress it, right? Mm. How I limit my own freedom, my own acceptance. And it's a challenging thing. I've mentioned this before in some of our conversations, that the body stuff is some of the hardest work that I have to do and that I've done. It is the hardest work. And it gets compounded as I move through life, because there's, now the big piece is aging, right? I was expected to be, I thought I should be, I was told what the ideal was as far as my body experience was. I was told what my body was for, which was not my own. Mm-hmm. And that was a whole set of beliefs and ideas and ways that I constricted and tried to tell myself I needed to be and I wasn't. Like in some ways, I just couldn't. I'm like genetically not able to be some of those things.
Yeah.
That were the ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then now that I'm getting older, there's just this whole other layer of unacceptability that I walk around in the world with, that I have been given, and as kind of unconscious of myself and the way that I fit in the world and patriarchy and all of that, I just took, right? So now at this age, I am worth what? My value at this age in this body with this, this like skin and this graying hair and this size and whatever else. Um, like there is a societal value that is put on me.
Mm. Yeah.
And like and I'm like, hold on, I wasn't done with dealing with the
Yeah.
I
Come back to
wasn't
step
done with
one.
dealing with like a regular, the regular female
Right. Yeah.
body expectations and disappointments and frustrations because I wasn't meeting the ideal. I never have. Never
Yeah.
have. And so when I think initially about body liberation, I am imagining my own emancipation under my own
Mm-hmm.
oppression that I was given,
Yeah.
but that is now mine. And then the extension of that is what is mine to do about that I was given, and that is continuing to be handed out to women in particular, to women
Yeah.
that are younger than me and that are moving through the world. Like what is mine to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of when I think of body liberation. That's the first layer. There are
Yeah.
layers, layers and layers. Maybe it's not the first layer. Maybe it's just the first layer that came to mind.
Yeah.
But that's what I think about.
Well, and that's the I don't know. There's so much depth to this conversation, depth and breadth to this conversation. We have been having it in a number of places this month, which has kind of been, well, it's been really cool actually to see in how the conversation comes up in different ways. And so far, like nobody has defined it the same way. There's been a lot of similarities and a lot of overlaps, but body liberation, like my mind just immediately goes to like one place, like and of course it's the experience that I had with my body in the world and the relationship to it, and so obviously deep sarcasm, obviously everyone else should have that same experience or would have that same experience. And it's like, oh man. And some of the things some of the things that come up are super obvious, like, oh yeah, no, I totally get that. And other things are things that like I think everyone can relate to in some way or another. And then some of the things that have come up so far are just so widely different. It's been amazing. And what has really stuck with me about it so far is that the experiences I think are so deep that it's like there seems to be this like version of like it's my experience and like other people wouldn't necessarily understand, or it was so quiet for so long, I didn't talk about it for so long that like we're all surprised or whatever, right? I mean, I because my own experience with body liberation, the thing that comes up to me like immediately is I didn't know for a long time that I had this memory, but it came up a couple weeks ago in part of this conversation. I was like, holy crap, yeah, I remember that really vividly. And I was probably like, I don't know, 5 years old, but I remember being at the doctor's office and being shown that chart of like height and weight and what it's supposed to be, right? You mentioned the shoulds, like those damn shoulds, what you should weigh, how tall you should be. And I guess I was really tall for a young kid, but I was also really large. And I didn't know what bearing that had or not as a little kid. I'm still not really sure that like I'm like I don't know that's I think we've just proven a lot of that whole weight stuff. Like, can we stop? But yeah, I was like, oh, I'm fat. Like from like the age of 5. And I was talking with Ryan the other day about this, and it's like, yeah, I don't think I took a deep breath out in public from the time I was probably like 5 years old till I was like 20,
Mhm.
because God forbid, like, oh
Mhm.
shit, I'm fat. I can't be fat. Fat's not okay. I can't be that, And like, I had this super solid, like, singular ab because I was always always engaging that core muscle of like that. But yeah, I was, oh man, like, would always go to the beach with a shirt on, and like, I look back at pictures, I was like, man, I was not fat at all. I mean, like,
Mhm.
whatever. But it's like, holy shit, the image that I had in my mind of, yeah, of like what a man is supposed to look like
Mhm.
at 7 years old, right? Like,
Yeah. It starts so early.
yeah, yeah, and and so there's been so many variations of the conversation so far this month, and definitely you and I have had very different experiences, and at the same time to note, like, oh, there are a lot of similarities. Like, the
Mhm.
world told us something very specific
Yeah.
that we consciously or unconsciously picked up on very early on. And I mean, I know I carried it for a long time, and probably, well, no, definitely do still to some degree. And, it sounds like the same.
Mhm.
Like, holy crap. um,
Yeah.
and I think one of the other commonalities I've seen is there's this level of like shame
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
like, oh man, like, what, I can't talk about this. I can't. And I think that's part of why the conversation feels so strong for this month and this week. This episode is like, no, this is something we do need to talk about. Everybody needs to talk about, because there's so many lies.
Mm.
There's just so many lies in this idea of like, the body should look like a certain thing, and if it doesn't, you're not healthy, or if it doesn't, you're not intelligent, or you're not worthy, or you're not whatever. I mean, there's so many other layers stacked on top of appearance and appearance and ability, and I don't know. We could go in so many different directions from that,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
um, I guess I'm curious. Before you knew any better, what were the views that were like given to you? How did the world inform your view of yourself, or even of the world, kind of before you knew better about the idea of some of that not being true, let alone the
Right.
idea that we can liberate ourselves from these views, liberate our bodies from this really systemic and deep issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I was taught at a very early age in my family, um, that the most valuable thing that I had to offer was what I look like. That was the loudest message that I got. And um, my father was and still is very, very trim and slim, and wants that of me. Wanted that of me as a young person, um, and I was I was put through a lot because I didn't fit that, and I don't I think I skated right through where whatever normal would have been. I just didn't
Yeah.
have that as part of my experience, and so his job then became to set me right, to
Mhm.
make sure that I complied with what he thought was valuable, and I think ultimately what he thought would help me to have a better life.
Yeah.
Right? He thought that this was really valuable in the world. That was how I was going to be successful. That was how I was going to get what he thought I needed to get, to have a good life.
Yeah.
And my mom was right there along with him. Whether they were together or not, um, letting me know like this was the role that I had. I had to keep my body appearing nice and attractive to get a man.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that was the bottom line: is I needed to make sure that I was pleasing to a man, and that was my job, and that was the ultimate goal that I had, was to get a man. And so I had, there was the whole, look beautiful, don't look like a slut.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
be
Right.
be enticing, but not too enticing. I mean, that whole thing from Barbie just kills me. The movie, that
Yeah.
just every time I hear it, I'm like, oh my god, yes, this was, you make sure that you look this way, but you have to make sure that in private you need to be a different way to make sure to keep your man. Like, this was just the training that I got. And as I got older, from family members, it was always like, oh, as if I didn't know what size I was. Oh my goodness. Well, you have such a pretty face. Like, it was, too bad you're fat because you have a pretty face, or you're really ruining it all because you could have more because you're fat, or oh, you seem like you're bigger than the last time I saw. Thank you so much for pointing that out. I didn't actually recognize that I'd grown. But this was central, central, central to my um, upbringing. And it wasn't just my parents, it was extended family as well. That I needed to look a certain way to be attractive and to draw, because my body's function was not for my own use. My body's function was not for me, was not to be able to go and do and be healthy and be strong. I'm always amazed because my middle, we all grew up together, and my middle brother goes to the gym like crazy. Like, he's always at the gym. He's always doing the exercise. He's always trying to, outdo himself. And I'm like, I got none of that. Like, none of that, because mine wasn't about being healthy. Mine was, how do I keep my body in a way that serves a man.
Yeah.
And so that was like that fundamental groundwork, that even though, years and years and years ago, I came out as a lesbian, and I don't engage in that kind of dynamic in my relationship, and I don't engage in that dynamic with my wife. Like, that's just not a part of who we are. It still operates in as far as what my worth is, right? In the world, what
Yeah.
my worth is. And let me tell you, Dan, it is coming up for me so hard right now, because I'm, entering a new year, and there's some dynamics in my professional life that are going to be shifting in the next, 6 months. And what am I going to be doing for
Mhm.
my living? And I'm looking at, speaking. This is just a natural thing for me. I love speaking.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do it fairly well. I enjoy it, and I think I can make some money doing that, right, on a bigger stage kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at that, and oh my gosh, all of my body stuff, as if it's not kind of always there, but it is roaring. It is coming so to the foreground of, like, if you're going to think you're going to get on a big stage the way you are and have anybody listen, you're kidding yourself. And that's not
Mm.
my front facing voice. It's coming from the back, those voices in my head.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to quiet that, to say no. I get sucked into it because I have the sense that if I don't look a certain way, nobody's going to hear me. Nobody's going to hear what I say as valuable. They wouldn't even know if it was valuable because nobody's going to be listening. I have to look a certain way in order to earn your attention, to then hear the content, to hear me, to somehow take a stab at you getting some value from something I have to say. It doesn't matter what I have to say if I don't look right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy just how supported and emphasized a lot of those views are. Like you said, like it's not my voice, it's the voice in the back, but like it came from somewhere. Like somebody or something said that, right? And those perspectives are echoed all over the place in our lives. And I have spent time in places where that is a very predominant cultural perspective. And I've spent time in places where people could care less. But yeah, man, do I understand that? And I've even I've even been part of speaking classes where, like classes on speaking, where the people teaching the classes have said to other people in the class, privately to some extent, but like basically said, like, if you want to go do this, you'd need to X, Y, and Z, and basically make changes to your body. And it's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
But then to go and experience that, like, I literally, because I guess people in the Northeast and people in New Jersey dress differently than people in some of the places I've been. And so I was in a fairly wealthy area, and was dressing the way I would dress here. And I mean, I literally had people offer to take me clothes shopping because my standards were not to.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You really? And it was exactly what you're talking about. Like, they couldn't hear what was being said because their minds were so distracted by the presentation. And let me tell you, like, I know that I can present really well from a platform, from a stage, from a podium, but it is not your boomer typical, like, predetermined, scripted out, like, message. Like, I ain't that. It's not going to be that. It's never going to be that. And yet this place was so, like, you got to check all the boxes of all the ways it's supposed to be. And it really, what I learned, my takeaway from this was, they would never hear, and in fact, they don't hear what the message is, no matter who it is, no matter what's being said, because what's being heard is confirmation bias.
Yeah.
This makes me feel good because it's supporting all of the things I already think. And so we're not here for new ideas or to learn or to actually hear a message. It's just to know that I'm doing it right. And so that's the thing, right? Like, that's the craziest part for me about this conversation and body liberation in general, I think, is that the reason it exists is so I know what I'm supposed to be. I know that I'm doing the thing. And if I go to the gym, if I do the diet, if I dress the certain way, if I can use both my legs and both my arms, if I'm able-bodied, if I can check those boxes, then okay. Everybody sees that I'm trying. Everyone sees that I'm doing that thing, right? And like that whole, like, going to the gym thing, man. Oh, wow. Like the whole gym bro scene.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How there are places where it's a healthy coming together of community, but I think most of the places it's like super toxic to the point of, I mean, it's like an eating disorder, body dysmorphia thing. Wow. So I being cognizant of our time here, what do you think are some of the unseen or lesser noticed effects of what I think we're really calling body shame here, right? Like the body shame that is prevalent throughout society, at least in the United States. What do you think are some of the unseen or lesser noticed effects of that maybe we're not talking about a lot?
I think one of the things that when you were talking earlier that came up to me is that song that just it's so true. The video killed the radio star, right? Like, there is so much in the world. There's so much good. There is so much wisdom. There's so much talent. There's so much in the world. But because you have to fit into a very small box in order to be received, we have cut out the majority of people.
Yeah.
And so people in general, if you don't fit in that very tiny and shrinking box of expectation, literally, then you're not actually included. Your voice isn't heard. Who you are isn't welcome here.
Yeah.
And so, how many people in this world are being excluded? Their brilliance, their creativity, all the things that they bring, that they are, the gifts that they have to give and share.
Yeah.
How many people aren't able to contribute that in this world, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like we are starving. Our culture, our society is starving for diversity, for variety, for brilliance that looks and sounds and feels different, right? It's all homogenized.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you hear the same message over and over. And it is a similar message, but you hear the same thing over and over and over again. And one of the things that I actually do enjoy about my what do you call that? My dirty little secret, my habit of TikTok is that it's all different kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
very different. And I'm not saying that I don't get ridiculous messaging, but
Hmm.
people have the ability to be heard or have the ability to at least speak
Yeah.
and get their voices out there that in a way that is not culled out because there are a certain number of people that are saying you're acceptable, you look right, you're what we want. Oh, good, you're this size, you're this shape, you have this belief system. Okay, here's the mic.
Yeah.
Here's the permission to show up and do your thing, and we will amplify you, right?
And you know what I love about TikTok is I think it's probably the only platform I've seen where if and when there is a dissenting voice where it's like, no, how dare you not check the boxes that I think everyone's supposed to check,
Mm-hmm.
that there are almost immediately, there are all of these people who are in support of each other coming into those comments and being like, no, stop it. Just
Mm-hmm.
stop it. We're not doing that anymore.
Right.
Not okay.
Right. Right. And
I think
it's
it's super
just,
cool.
yeah, when you get more voices together where there is not a small group of people that are culling through that, not just, I mean, I don't know how TikTok operates. I don't know what they aren't doing in the background. But what I know is that, in that experience, I see people that look very different, very, very. Belinda and I, like my wife and I, like to watch British television because people look normal. They don't all look the same, right? Like they
Yeah.
have they look like people,
Just people.
right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
people, and how wonderful that is to
Yeah.
actually, run across such a variety of people that we don't usually get to see or hear from anymore. And so that piece for me is like what we have lost because we will only hear, because we will only amplify, because we only allow people that fit into a small little box, that then we think this is the reality of our world because that's all we see. When
Yep.
I'm not represented in the world that I see in television or in media of any type, when I'm not represented, then somehow there's something wrong with me. And that's what it whittles it down to, is there's something wrong with me. I should be like this, but I'm like this. And so now I spend so much time and energy and effort, and so much of my peace is taken up by this obsession of how I don't fit in. And sometimes it's because I want to fit in, but most of the time these days it's because I just want to be fucking heard. I
Yeah.
just want to be heard or have the opportunity to say something where I might be heard. And and I stopped myself, right? I started off by saying like, oh my God, well, I don't fix the box. Do I need to color my hair? Do I need to, be a certain size? Oh my gosh, when I was doing my speaking classes, it was like, you probably want to go see a stylist or consider what region you're at, right? Like what region of the country are you at? If you're doing ministerial work, what is the feel and the desire of your community? And it's like, well, what about like me? Like
Yeah.
I should color my hair because people don't color their hair. I mean, color their hair here, or whatever the deal is. And
Yeah.
I think that shrinking, that somehow what you look like is the number one priority, the number one aspect of me that is valuable. That's the least valuable thing about me.
Yeah.
And it would be the least valuable thing about me if I looked like whatever the ideal is. It's the least valuable thing about me.
Yeah.
It's the least interesting thing about me. And what I want to stop doing is, I'm thinking about my own body liberation, is I want to stop apologizing for myself. I want to stop
Yes.
apologizing for what I look like. I want to stop apologizing for for my butt being this big, or being so tall, or being this age, or having this gray hair, or the way that your body looks at this age is so different, and it changes so much. You're like, oh damn, what is happening? But wouldn't it be brilliant? Because I've been dreading this my whole life. I was taught to dread this aging process my whole life. And what I want to have happen, and what I want to be a part of, is for women in particular to begin to look at this aging process as a gift. And what I have
Yeah.
gotten out of this progression in my life is an absolute gift. I have a voice that I have never had before. I have confidence that I have never had before. And all I have been doing my whole life has been in fear of this stage of my life, and had the intent, how am I going to fight that? I mean, my God, my nieces are Botoxing themselves, and God bless them, and I
Yeah.
love them. And it's like, what are you doing?
Hi.
What are you
Yeah.
doing? You're brilliant. You're beautiful. And that's the least damn interesting thing about you. Who are you?
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you believe? What's valuable to you? What's important to you? And how can you begin to, instead of, but it's not about shaming and putting your body aside as if it's not important, but balancing it out. Body liberation is balancing that out so that I can clear my brain of this crap that has been cluttering it since I was a little kid, just like you. It takes up so much space, and the question I have all the time is, what if that wasn't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if that big, big chunk of energy and worry and shame and fear and concern and manipulation and all of that, what if that wasn't there? What would I be doing with that space
Hmm.
and that energy and that time?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I so many thoughts. Oh my God, you just got the gears going so much, and I want to go back to a second for uh the thought that kind of sparked this part of the conversation is this idea that the thing that our society probably needs the most is the thing that we're then not doing because we need it the most, right? Like that idea that because there is this view that bodies are supposed to be prescribed to a certain checklist or whatever keeps us from doing the thing that we all need as a society, or one of the things, dare I say, need, um, that would then allow us to not have those views anymore, right? Like if we valued people's message, their uniqueness, the thing that's uniquely that, like what's uniquely you? What do you have to bring to the
Mhm.
world to offer? So many people immediately don't do because of the views of their body that the world tells them you can't or you shouldn't. But if we were all encouraged to do that thing, we wouldn't need to have the views, or wouldn't have the views that the world currently has about what our bodies are supposed to be. And I just like, how insane is that it's like it's this self-perpetuating thing that like we shut down the uniqueness, we shut down the messages which keep people from offering the thing that is uniquely them to the world. And by doing that, we keep that echo chamber, confirmation bias. This is, I know it's not what I need, but it's comfortable.
Yeah.
or I'm so uncomfortable in being uniquely me that I'm just going to prescribe myself to this checklist
Mm-hmm.
and find the people all around me that also do that. And anyone who comes in doing anything different is just like shut down, pushed away, ostracized, belittled, whatever it is. And it just seems so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you have those kind of conversations where that the obvious part just becomes so obvious, you're just like, what the hell, man? Like, what? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then to yeah, yeah, to just really embrace that idea of like what is possible. Like, what if we didn't have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't. And that's the thing. We don't have to. We don't have to. We literally can go do that which we're all called to do. And if there is any should in the world, it's you probably should do the thing you're being called to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the benefit on the world because of that is huge. And yeah, I mean, not to always be going back to TikTok, but like I think that's one of the major benefits of that social media platform in the world is that there is immediate and direct connection to every corner of the world
Mm-hmm.
in ways where there never was before. And there's huge positives from that. And then there's also this like growing, I don't know, disdain or whatever. Like people are like doubling down on that desire for confirmation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so I think we're seeing a lot of that in the world. We're seeing a lot of, imagine if you lived 80 years, even 50, 60, 75 years in a box that says this is what the world is. And then all of a sudden, well, it's not all of a sudden, but we've ignored it long enough that it feels like all of a sudden here is regular access just being like regular access to all of the world just like bombarding us.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine being the one in that box like freaking out and being like, no, the box is it. And
Right.
so it is, I think there is a lot of challenge. I think there's challenge for people who are trying to have the body liberation conversation, who are trying to get out of this mold, or who are stepping out of the mold. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's also challenge for those who are denying the conversation, who are trying to stay in that
Yeah.
box. So I guess to wrap this up quickly, fairly quickly, what does it look like in a world that has a belief in the value of a liberated body? And how do we, like what 2, 3 steps we can each take, anybody could take, like
Mm-hmm.
today, tomorrow, that help us get there?
I mean, to imagine us walking towards that, which I think, which I think is like if you get the conspiracy theorist out in me, it's like, well, this is not by accident, right? Like
Mm.
I do have that part of me that feels like it's by accident, and still, right? Like, so what? It
Right.
doesn't mean that I have to be stopped. And I think that a big piece of this work is well, the biggest piece of this work is internal, right?
Mm.
I need to liberate my body from my oppression. I have to do that. That is
Mm.
my work. And what is it that I have to do to begin to take steps toward that? What is the value that I have for myself, right? And for my body, right? What is that? And to begin to identify what those things are about my body and how brilliant it is and how grateful I am for it. Exactly as it is today. So to take the emphasis off of what I'm not,
Mm.
off of how I'm, how far outside the box I am, in what ways, and what other people think of it. It's like, okay, I'm grateful for my body. I can move around in my world, and I'm so grateful for my body. And also to take back for me whose body this is. This is my body. You have yours. Do what you got to do with it. This is my body. And I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm not here for your approval. I'm not here to make you feel better. That's not what my body is here for. It's my body for me to go and enjoy and live life and experience these senses and to engage in the world.
Yeah.
And then I think, what's the next step is once we can kind of come to some sort of, well, maybe not once like starting the journey, you don't have to wait till you have it done, but
Yeah.
to begin to step out despite whatever doesn't resonate, whatever is outside of the small definition of success or acceptable is, and to begin to take steps to do you, be you, express you in the world, right? At the same time, fortifying your own strength and your own belief in yourself, and then say something, do something, speak your voice. Um, those are the what feel like teeny tiny little movements for me that I've been making over my lifetime that have added up to, there's still a ways to go, but it's added up to the point where I can actually hear when I'm doing that shit to myself.
Mm.
I'm aware of when I'm doing it, which is a huge growth. So now it's like, okay, you're doing it.
Yeah.
You're thinking that if you want to go do this other thing for a living, that you've got, isn't that interesting? Is it because you're speaking to be accepted? Or are you
Mm.
speaking because speaking is what you need to do? I'm speaking because speaking is what I need to do. That's my thing. And you can accept me, you cannot accept me. And I have a belief in something bigger than that, that it will propel me forward and reveal success for myself. So that's, I don't know. Was that three things?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like, do it anyway.
Yeah. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. The world
Yeah.
needs you. The
And
world
the
needs you and your little peculiar, different,
right.
oddball, funky, whatever you look like. Cottonwood trees here in New Mexico are these gnarly, weird, twisted trees. They're just so brilliant and beautiful, and they are weird and twisted and magnificent. And if we could just see ourselves and each other that way, of like, wow,
Yeah.
you're different. Who
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah. 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 And I think there's the impact on ourselves when we do that work, but then the impact that has on those around us, I think, is like tenfold, right? One person being able to have this conversation out loud with somebody else just ripples in every direction. And so imagine, if you are the person up on stage somewhere, including this part of the conversation in the message from that, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man. So not only do I get to do the work, I get to do the work out loud
Mm,
and tell people about it and show people about it.
mm,
And because like part of this too is like, if you're listening to this conversation and you're having thoughts that are in agreement or in disagreement or confusion or whatever, going to curiosity about it, like
mm,
just letting it be okay, right? Because I think it's really easy to get defensive when
mm,
our views are challenged, right? It's like, oh, why do I believe that? Why do I, like, even if you agree, why do I agree? Why do I believe what you're saying? And just even knowing that, right? I think that's what you're saying, like doing the work, like knowing yourself well enough to know, oh, I'm having this thought. Oh, I recognize I'm having this thought. Wonder where that thought came from.
mm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like get to like be at that place strong in your own power and say, I'm not in agreement with your rules.
Yeah.
I'm not in agreement with your rules. And your rules may have been built to keep me out of the conversation, but I don't agree to your rules.
Yeah. And that is absolutely the in-between. Stepping outside of the box,
Yeah.
outside of the predetermined rules that none of us agreed to, but were just given and expected to follow, and figuring out ways to do that where we can create change and shift, embracing that discomfort. Oh man, yeah, that is the in-between for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once again, we get to be really uncomfortable and try new things.
I'm very familiar with the
Yeah.
This is good. This is
Yeah. Oh, so thank you so much, Yvette, for being here and having this conversation and having it publicly where people can listen.
good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I always love what you bring to the table, and thank you all for listening and contemplating body liberation and what that means for you and people in your sphere of influence, and how you might impact that, how you already impact that, and how you're going to impact that going forward. So thanks for being here. And until next time, we hope that for you, a lot of shift happens. Nobody really enjoys being in the in-between, but thanks for being here anyway. We may not have found all of the answers, but certainly some. And maybe more importantly, a little shift has happened. Because that is really what it's all about. Learning to be curious, authentic, and yes, maybe even a tad bit vulnerable. And the beauty of it all is that we are not alone in the in-between. So until next time, we hope a lot of shift happens.